Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at the MSI MPG B650 Carbon Wi-Fi, a premium level board which is almost server quality but at actually a reasonable price, and it's got a ton of features, so let's find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at the MSI MPG B650 Carbon Wi-Fi. This is one of the MPG range or gaming range of boards from MSI, suitable for the AMD AM5 platform for Series 7000 processors, and no doubt 8000 series or 9000 series whenever they come out, obviously if they stick to the AM5 sockets, which none of us know at the moment, so this is all a little bit new. And for a lot of people possibly getting into the AM5 platform, you're not too sure what you need, what you want, all those kinds of things, and what features do you have? Do you have PCIe Gen5? Do you have Gen4? Do you have enough M.2 slots? Does it support SATA? There's probably a ton of questions, so hopefully today in this video we're going to go through, do an unboxing and try and answer some of those questions that you may have regarding this board. Now, I should also say thank you so much to MSI UK for sending this one over to me for review purposes. It will be going back at the end of the review, so I don't get to keep it unfortunately, but if you've got any further comments or questions after the end of the video, then please do let us know in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer them as best I can. So starting off with the board, obviously this is part of the Carbon range, so this has the Carbon black colour scheme as you can see, and it is pretty much mostly just black throughout. There's a few little accent colours such as the kind of gold on the caps there for the audio, got a little bit of red there as well, and there is the MSI Dragon here, which when powered does illuminate in glorious RGB, which may or may not be your thing. Obviously, if you want to, there is a switch at the bottom. You can just turn off all the RGB if you want that stealthy look. But for some people, you might appreciate a little bit of extra lighting in that particular region. Now, this board is a little bit of a takeaway of some of the other boards in the range from the B650 range, such as the Tomahawk, which we've reviewed previously, which you can check out from a link below. This is an upgrade in most respects. You've got additional M.2 slots. You also got PCIe Gen5, only for the M.2 slot. We are still using PCIe Gen4x16 for the graphics card slot, but there's a host of other features. We've got an upgraded VRM setup, so if you want to go for a slightly more heavy-duty processor, then certainly this board should be able to cope with it. We've also got a heat pipe built into the VRM cooler, so again, all of things are just slightly beefed up, as you'd expect from a slightly more premium model. So anyway, that is the kind of intro done. Let's take a look at the packaging. So as you can see, this is the B650 Carbon Wi-Fi. We've mentioned that once or twice already. Lightning Gen 5, we do have Gen 5 support, as we've already mentioned, and it is part of the B650 range. On the back of the box, it's going to go over some of the features we've possibly already mentioned already, but it's worth highlighting them. So the first one is going to be the VRM setup. Pretty decent VRM on here. So we've got a 16 plus 2 plus 1. And if you think back to the days of the B450 range, where you were lucky to get 4 phases, things have moved up incredibly, hence why these boards are clearly more expensive than their B550 and even their B450 brethren. We've also got Gen 5 support, as we've already mentioned, M.2 shield, we've got the Frozzers on there, screwless M.2 connectivity, Wi-Fi 6E, the all important. If you do like using your wireless connectivity, you don't have to worry about being super sluggish. You have got Wi-Fi 6E giving you the greatest possible speeds that are currently available on the market. And also you do have Bluetooth 5.2, so if you're using Bluetooth peripherals, maybe a headset or a keyboard, don't worry, this will have you covered straight out of the box. Premium thermal design, that is basically going through to the weight of the board. There's essentially heat sinks on pretty much everything important. You also got support for the latest DDR5 memory. Now this is a little bit of a kind of a shot in the dark because obviously DDR5 is pretty much still in its infancy and isn't that widely accepted at the moment. A lot of people are still on DDR4, but in terms of what is actually available for DDR5, this will currently support up to DDR5 6600 and above, although 6600 at the moment is kind of where they're laying their claim. Realistically, for Ryzen, you do really want to have the fastest DDR speeds you possibly can, and ideally with low latency as well. You can, if you want to, use considerably lower ranked DDR5, such as 4800, etc., but ideally you want to be looking around the 5600 or 6000 range if at all possible. Also, we've got audio boost, so we've got a really good audio chipset on here, courtesy of Realtek. That is the ALC 4080, which is new and improved over the previous ALC 1220. Really good sound quality and does have support for 7.1 surround audio, SpeedIF, etc, etc. Another nice feature, again, as networking is becoming more and more of a thing, people are using network attached storage or just having ridiculously fast internet speeds. This has got 2.5 gigabit LAN built in straight away. Also on the back of the box there is a picture of the back I/O and some of the more features. I'll give you that. If you want to pause the video and check that in more detail, feel free to do so now. Taking a look inside the box at what you actually get, there isn't a great deal. Obviously you get the motherboard itself, you do get the MSI sticker sheet, so you've got plenty of stickers there to label up all your cables should you want to for cable management, and also some stickers to go over BIOS, battery, and a few little lucky stickers as well if you want to use those. You also get 3 M.2 lockers. So these are MSI's new design for actually retaining M.2 drives. There are 3 actually on the board already in the various places, but if for any reason they get broken or damaged, you can replace them with these, which is a really nice touch. Also included for the Wi-Fi 6E, you get a pair of antenna to screw into the back on the SMA connectors. You also get the European Union regulatory notice, again, and also you get the quick installation guide, and on the back of that there are some QR codes, so if you do want to have a manual, you will need to scan that. Unfortunately, there is no user manual included. A little bit of an upgrade from what we had with the Tomahawk, we actually get a pair of SATA cables now, which is still a little bit on the stingy side, but I guess 2 are better than 1, and 1 is, well, better than none. Also included is a nice little RGB cable, so this is going to adapt certain types of RGB components that use the 3-pin section there to the more standard 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB. Again, certain devices will require that, but don't worry because there's plenty of RGB headers on the board. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the meat and potatoes of this. This is the board itself, and as you can see, I like it. I think it's really pretty. They've done a really good job on the design ethic on this, and best of all, there's no beige or brown or green. Well done, MSI. Gigabyte, you could take a leaf out of their book. So in this section here, we've got the VRM cooler, which is an absolute beast of a cooler, and also, like I said earlier, you've got the addressable RGB there for the Dragon logo. The actual VRM heatsinks do have a heat pipe going through them as well, so they are actually linked should you want to remove them or anything. So yeah, that's really good, and they're using really good thermal compound on there, or thermal pads with, I think it's 7 kilowatt per meter ratings. Apparently that's a good thing. I'm not entirely sure, but from what I can tell, this is going to do a fantastic job due to the amount of weight there of metal. It's going to do fantastic. And if you're using a lower end processor such as the 7600, then yeah, this is going to be a walk in the park. But if you're going for something high end like a 7950, it's still going to cope with it really, really well. In the middle, obviously we've got our AM5 socket there, which is protected with the cover on it. So this is the 1718 pin set. A little bit of a change, so we don't have the traditional pins on our processors now. The pins are actually on the motherboard, so you do want to look after those, make sure you keep them covered and don't damage the pins, otherwise basically your board won't work, which is never a good thing. Looking across, we've got our 4 RAM slots, so this is going to currently support up to 128 gigabytes of RAM, again DDR5 6600 megahertz or mega transfers per second. Potentially that is going to be upgraded. There has been talk in the media that this will start supporting 192 gigabytes, so 32 gig sticks in each one, I think that is, or yeah, anyway, or 64 gigs. I'm not entirely sure, but there is talk about that. Currently, as it stands on the website and in the manuals, it's currently stating 128 gigabytes, but I would expect that to change. Looking at connectivity for our fans, etc. So you've got our fan header there, which is nice and close to the CPU. You've also got a AIO pump header there, or water cooling. So if you're using a D5 pump or some kind of custom water cooling, you can plug that in there also. Then you've got your first of your system fan headers. Then there is a custom section there for connecting up specific MSI equipment. But what we do have is a 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB. Always like to see those. And right next to it, just in case one isn't enough, there's an additional one. So if you've got a bunch of fans in the front, maybe 3 or 4 fans, you can hook those up to the first one. If you've got a bunch of stuff in the top, such as an AIO or extra fans in the roof section of your case, there's another header there. So you don't have to worry too much about daisy chaining. Both of those are in a pretty decent position, in my opinion. Something else which is in a decent position, which is actually pretty much going to be across the board included on our MSI motherboards, and that is our diagnostic D-LED. Underneath the debug, we've got another system fan header. There's 7 headers in total if you take into consideration the AIO pump, so it should be enough for most people. 24-pin power connector there. Something I didn't mention actually, at the top there is 2 8-pin connectors, so you can get an absolute ton of juice going through there. I don't know why I didn't mention that earlier. I guess it is kind of tucked away at the top there, but anyway, it is what it is. Underneath that, you've got a USB Type-C front panel connector. Below that, there are 4 SATA ports and a sideways mounted USB 3.0 header. So that's a nice place for that to be, nice and easy to get to. Saves you bending pins, etc. when trying to get it in the front way and wrenching the cables around. So I personally like it in that direction. And actually, if you look very closely in the background, you'll see my other board, which is kind of similar. The Tomahawk has got the cable going out the side straight into a grommet, and it looks very clean. Underneath that, so there's another system fan header. Then we've got our front panel connector. Next to that, there is a section so you can plug up a speaker if you want to. So if you like listening to BIOS bleeps, then you can knock yourself out, connect something up there. Above that, there is a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header. So that's 3 of those in total, 1 there, 2 at the top. Next to that, a couple more SATA ports. So you've got 6 SATA ports in total. Then you've got a couple of USB 2.0 headers for things like add-on devices such as maybe a Corsair Commander, that sort of thing. Then even more fan headers, so another 2 down there. And of course, all the fan headers can be controlled really easily in the BIOS. I've done videos on that before. I'll also try and link that video in the video description as well, or some of the links, so you can check that if you want to. MSI's implementation of fan control is possibly one of the best on the market at the moment, which is why I generally try to stick with MSI boards. Also, at the bottom there, you've got some more headers. So you've got JT1, you've also got your couple more there. So there is the CMOS reset, all that kind of stuff, all these little pins down there. Something which some of you may be interested in is a hardware switch for turning off your LEDs. So if you are somebody who doesn't like addressable RGB or LED lighting in any way, shape or form, there's actually a hardware button down here. So literally flick it across, RGB off, RGB on. Very simple, very easy to do. So you don't have to go hunting around in the BIOS, although you can do if you want to. We have done BIOS tours as well, so again, very easy to turn off in the BIOS should you want to. Moving across, so you've got your J-Dash connector. So J-Dash is their kind of programming or performance tool you can get from MSI, which potentially will be being built into MSI cases going forward. It's kind of like a performance monitor, essentially kind of tying in with MSI Center, so you can kind of almost like have a touch screen on the front of your case that links into MSI Center, and you can control performance, lighting, all that kind of stuff. That will be plugging into there. Also, there is a standard 12-volt RGB. So if you've got some old school RGB, you can plug that in on the bottom. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got your front panel audio connector, HD audio, and you've got all of your audio circuitry all isolated from the rest of the board. And I should say, actually, the board is a 6-layer PCB, and there's 2 ounces of copper separating it as well. So it is kind of like a server-grade board. It's very heavy as well, actually. It's making my arm hurt. You'll be surprised, actually, when you get this out of the box, you'll notice the difference in weight immediately due to just the ridiculous VRM cooling and also the kind of structure of the board itself. Obviously, BIOS battery down here. Moving back across here, so we've got at the bottom PCI Express Gen4x1 port, so you can plug in things like maybe a 10 gig Ethernet port or some kind of capture cards, that sort of thing. You've also got 3 M.2 slots here, all PCI Express Gen4x4. These are powered from the chipset. So there's one underneath this. You're probably seeing some B-roll from what I filmed earlier. So 1 drive goes in there, and you get another 2 drives in here. Sandwiched in between those drives, you do have another PCI Express Gen4x16 size slot. So if you do want to have some kind of other capture cards, maybe a Camlink Pro from Elgato, whatever it is, you can plug those in there. Quite a lot of the M.2 additional add-on cards tend to be ×4 or ×8 sized, so you can get those in there nice and easily. Also at the top, PCI Express Gen4x16 slot for your main graphics card, and also you've got the MSI kind of extra security on there to stop it wiggling around, all that kind of stuff. And at the top, the star of the show, Lightning Gen 5 support for your M.2 drives. So now that Lightning Gen 5 drives are starting to appear on the market, although they are quite expensive, but they are super fast. So if you want to take advantage of that, you can stick that in the top there. You can, if you want to, just put a standard PCI Express Gen4x4 drive or ×3x4, whatever. It will still work in there. The one thing that won't work across all of these slots are SATA-based M.2 drives. So these are NVMe drive style only. Do bear that in mind when you're making your purchasing. If you maybe see a slightly older SATA M.2 drive on the market and you're thinking, oh, I'll stick that in there to stick my games on, don't bother, it will not work. Also tucked away just above that, there is a TPM header. Now you don't really have to worry about that because you do have firmware TPM on the AM5 processors throughout the range, but if for some reason you're in some kind of business environment and you have a specific type of TPM which you must use, then there is a small header for that up there. Other than that, you've got a rather large heatsink there. on the B650 chipset to keep things cool. They've done that primarily so they don't have to use a fan on this to keep it cool, which I personally prefer. The X570 boards pretty much all had fans on, which were a little bit annoying, and obviously it is a moving part and does have a tendency to fail over time. So I think that is it for the board. Let's take a look on the side and look at our I/O. So this is actually a really nice I/O setup in my opinion. So you've got two hardware buttons here, one of which is for CMOS reset. So if you're thinking, right, I've got a crazy VRM, let's do some overclocking. If you dial in some settings which it just refuses to boot, then you can just press that button and reset your CMOS back to the defaults, and it's a really nice button actually. It almost feels like a mechanical keyboard switch, really nicely done. Next to that, there is the obligatory BIOS flashback. So you can use a USB stick to flash the latest BIOS on your motherboard should you wish to, or if for some reason the BIOS gets corrupted, potentially if you've used MSI Center to update your BIOS and it's all gone horribly wrong, then you can use that to flash on a new BIOS. Really like to see those, and also they're illuminated as well, so you get a kind of visual feedback of what is actually going on. Very good stuff. Next to that, there is our HDMI and display ports. So the HDMI is going to be for the AM5 processors, which currently all have onboard graphics. Not the strongest, but it is a display, so best not to knock it. The HDMI is going to be HDMI 2.1 HDR, so it's going to support 4K 60Hz with HDR. And also you've got your DisplayPort 1.4, which actually is going to support up to 8K 60Hz, which is yeah, pretty crazy. Obviously you won't be gaming like that on onboard graphics, but for display purposes, big screens, watching movies, it should be absolutely fine. Next to that, we've got a whole bunch of USB ports. So all the red color coded ones are USB 3.2 Gen 1, 10 gigabit per second ports, and there's 7 of those in total. Underneath the last one there is a USB 3.2 Gen 2, so that is the ×2 port, so that's 20 gigabit per second on your USB Type-C. Just in between, 2.5 gig LAN, supplied by Realtek, so that's the RTL8125F, I think it is now. And then you've got a couple of standard USB ports there, so happy days, no problems there. Something which you may have noticed already is the fact that none of the actual USB ports have the BIOS flashback logo on them, which is something of a slightly new thing. It does appear that you can kind of essentially use any of the ports. At least that is the way it seems at the moment. I will be doing a BIOS flashback on this for a video for reference purposes, so if you want to see how that goes, obviously subscribe to the channel and you'll see that when it comes out. Moving on, yeah, 2 USB 2.0 ports should you want to use them, backwards compatibility, etc. You've got your SMA connectors for your antenna for the onboard Wi-Fi 6E. That is on a sort of M.2 card, which 2 screws there. If you take all this off, you can actually replace those. So when Wi-Fi 7 comes out, or Wi-Fi 8, as long as it's compatible with the socket, you can upgrade that. And next to that, you've got your audio solution. So this is again from the ALC 4080, and you've got your 7.1 surround sound, and also you have a SpeedIF. So there you go. There is a tour of the MSI MAG B650 Carbon Wi-Fi. This is pretty much the killer board, I think, for this particular generation as it stands at the moment. You could do a lot worse. Now, obviously, if you don't have the budget for it, something like the Tomahawk is going to be absolutely fine for you and is my kind of daily driver in the background for my streaming PC. But if you just want a little bit more, slightly more future-proofing, or you do need that additional M.2 slot because you've just got 4 drives and you've got to fill them all up, then maybe this is worth taking a look at. Obviously, as well, you do have the enhanced VRM over the Tomahawk, plus the heatsink. You've also got basically just, I think personally, a slightly nicer looking board, and something like the RGB on the logo there is one of those things that just ticks a box for me. Maybe it doesn't for you, but it does for me because I'm a little bit sad like that. So anyway, again, massive shout out to MSI UK for letting me borrow this one for review purposes. It's absolutely excellent. And I suppose all that's left for me to say is, obviously, if there's any comments or questions or anything which you feel I didn't cover or that I need to explain in more depth, please feel free to reach out in the comments section below. I'll be more than happy to take your questions. I think that's going to wrap things up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.